The visual communication is without a doubt, I think, the low hanging fruit to talk about, right? Communication is streamlined. I'm able to communicate issues with my subcontractors pretty easily, give them snapshots of locations. I'm able to do BIM model comparisons and say, hey, this is what the design intent is. This is where we're off. We also had a visual where we had a retaining wall that we had built, and the retaining wall was just slightly off in terms of how they had built it. And while it wasn't a source of truth, if you will, right, that we can contractually reference, nonetheless, we were able to talk about it and kind of see what the intent and thought process, because it was a delegated design soil nail wall engineered system. So it was slightly off, but we were able to kind of communicate what our concerns on site were pretty easily with the visuals. We've also had some interesting items on our project in terms of coordination and slightly different sequencing that we've been able to kind of visually set eyes on in the model that weren't necessarily, and interestingly, some people weren't able to visualize it in terms of what was on the drawings just because of the slightly different variation or sequence it was going in. So we were able to kind of break that apart and do a walkthrough and put people at ease in terms of, okay, this is how this is sequenced and this is how it's playing out. So that's the low-hanging fruit. Now, ConstructN has also started doing schedule analysis with the leveraging of reality capture and photo capture. We haven't dove too deep into that process as of yet. We're in the process of setting up the framework for it. So I'm very excited to see it. Now, we have discussed, of course, some limitations and so on and so forth, but I think the prospects of what its capability is extremely exciting. And I think from a project management standpoint, if it's able to do some of that, I think there is, if not a core source of truth, if you will, in terms of information for me, at the very least, it gives me a baseline that I may otherwise not have that I could leverage. I'm pretty sure the accuracy will improve over time, but I think that's still a work in progress.
I think you're right. I think that's the race, and there's quite a few companies out there doing this, right? Yep. And that's the beauty of an arms race, is that in our world, that's a great thing. And them taking the sort of the approach with you of really going to the problem and studying the problem and giving you pieces to solve along the way, everybody's got a different attack at it, right? And this is a good one. I think they've got some future stuff. I love the idea of, analyzing your schedule and sequencing and progress tracking and, really then lining that up to the model as they get more accurate to bring things back to you. Before I let it go over to Tanis, though, really quick, I will bring us back to the pre-show a little bit, because you hit on something in the pre-show that is near and dear to my heart, and Tanis will know this. I hate ROI. I can't stand return on investment, because it is just a completely misunderstood term. Because for every minute we save, it's not like we put that minute back, right? Mm-hmm. We use that minute for something else. So it's all about, where your focus is, and you have a different term for it. So let people know what your term and approach is there.
Absolutely. So my reference to ROI is return on implementation. And I truly believe in that being the case, because unless we really study and learn something, we're not going to understand how to really leverage it for the traditional ROI, if I were to call it that, we typically talk about. Because really, for it to make sense in dollars, you need to gain efficiency. In order to gain efficiency, you need to understand the tool, gain the practice, find out the pain points, really reconfigure your workflows. Because really and truly, it's not as simple as just taking something and inserting it into our existing workflow, right? Of course, we want that to happen, but at the same time, there are adjustments that are required to flex a little bit to make sure that we're able to really leverage the tool. Now, if we don't play with the tool, there is no baseline for us to really gauge how to practice and pursue efficiency. So I truly think you have to practice implementation. Now, of course, there are barriers to that. There's cost factors to it, size of companies and not being able to buy broad-based licenses. But I use this even with talking to some of my students, or even when I'm in general talking about construction technology. I mean, I would look really silly if I went for a job presentation today and said, "Hey guys, I use a laptop," right? Well, in the past, yeah, I used to use a typewriter. I used to write a letter by hand, and use snail mail, whatever you want to call it. But it's not enough for me to go and tell you, hey, from a technology standpoint, I'm really advanced. I use a laptop, right? 5 years from now, we're not going to go and say, hey, I use XYZ construction technology tools. I almost feel like when the maturity of tech comes into construction, we'll almost approach it in the format of, well, yeah, it's like having a laptop. We shouldn't be having it anyway. There's nothing to really talk about, I don't think we're there yet, but once we get there, it's going to be ridiculous almost. So when I talk to people about, when you think about return on investment, if you will, I also caution them to think, well, you didn't really bat an eyelid about laptops. Laptop saves you time. Agree. Sure, it was probably very expensive to buy computers when you were early adopters. Over time, it's become cheaper, and I think construction tech in some cases may follow the same kind of principle, where an early adopter probably may invest a little bit more in terms of the hardware and software and so on. But hey, they also get a head start at creating special use cases. So there's a trade-off, I think, that, from an innovation standpoint, if you have an innovation mindset, I think you could look at return on implementation more than you can look at return on investment.